Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the New Rochelle Public Library public meeting. I think Whitney's going to start us off.
Hello. I'm just going to remove my mask when I speak. Good evening. On behalf of the New Rochelle Public Library, welcome and thank you for joining us for this community meeting tonight. Please note that tonight's meeting will be recorded from this point forward. Tonight's meeting will be translated into Spanish. Can we please take a moment to ensure that our participants using our translation services are able to properly access that feature? Just go to the bottom right corner of your screen and select the interpretation icon, and then select your preferred language from the list of options, either English or Spanish, as shown here. Everything's good? Looks good? Thank you. We are here tonight, because we need your help to shape the future of the New Rochelle Public Library. This evening marks our second and final community meeting to gather your input to inform the library's strategic plan. In addition to community meetings, we released a survey to gather resident feedback on the library's programs and facilities. The survey was launched both online and in paper format, in English and in Spanish, on Friday, July 30th, and will close on Sunday, October 3rd. Please complete the survey if you haven't already, and encourage your friends, family, neighbors, and colleagues to participate as well, please. Feedback gathered from our community meetings and the survey will inform the goals and objectives of our upcoming strategic plan. The Department of Education requires all public libraries to have a 5-year strategic plan, and our last plan spanned 2015 to 2020, so we are due. The goal of the 5-year plan is to provide a concrete vision for improving the safety, accessibility, and quality of the library for residents all across New Rochelle. This next strategic planning process is timely because last year the New Rochelle Public Library commissioned a building audit of both the main branch and the Huguenot Children's Library on North Avenue. The audit uncovered needs in both buildings. Therefore, tonight we seek to understand your vision for and experience with the library's facilities in order to shape the goals we set forth in improving upon the library's physical space. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight in person and virtually. This meeting will be an hour and a half, and I want to remind you again that it's being recorded. Now I would like to introduce Celeste Fry and the team at Public Works Partners who have been working with us. They are the consulting firm helping us with this whole strategic planning process. And it's been a wonderful experience so far. Celeste.
Yes, thank you, Whitney. And thank you all for being here tonight and for having us here as well. My name is Celeste Fry, and I'm the CEO of a small consulting firm called Public Works Partners. We're based in New York City. We work throughout Westchester and the tri-state area. We work with a lot of cultural organizations and libraries, and we focus on strengthening organizations that strengthen our communities. We have really been enjoying our work so far with the New Rochelle Public Library, including the public meeting that we did a little earlier this year on this strategic planning process, and we envision a bright future for the library. I'm accompanied this evening by Aurelia Aceves-Hogan, Jordan Cosby, and Bibi Lagardeur from our team. Today's meeting has both in-person participants, thank you for being here, and folks joining us via Zoom. Thank you all for joining us as well. If you're participating via Zoom and you have technical issues or immediate questions, please send a message using the chat function, and our team will be able to respond to you. As Tom and Whitney mentioned, the goal of tonight's conversation is to help inform this 5-year strategic plan for New Rochelle Public Library to implement from this year through 2026. This plan will be shaped by input gathered from the New Rochelle Public Library Board of Trustees, library staff, library patrons, and also the broader New Rochelle community through these meetings, through the survey that we've been doing that Whitney has shared, and other means to learn more about the library's future programming and also the physical features. Here's our agenda for tonight's meeting. Aurelia will provide a quick overview of the strategic planning process, and then Tom, Whitney, and the New Rochelle Public Library Board of Trustees will speak to the current state of the library's facilities. We'll then facilitate a visioning exercise to gather your input, provide a brief overview of the capital financing process, and then leave time at the end for questions and answers for participants gathered both in person and those of you that are joining us online. After the Q&A, we'll wrap up with a few announcements. As Whitney mentioned, this community meeting is not your only opportunity to provide feedback on the library's future. We have a live survey that's both online, which can be accessed through the library's website, and in paper format, and I believe that we have copies here this evening. It's in both English and Spanish, both on paper and online, and it gets at many of the same issues that we'll be addressing tonight. The survey has been available since the end of July and will be available through this weekend, through October 3rd. We have paper copies here tonight, as I said, and you can fill them out at the end of the meeting. And now I'll pass it off to Aurelia, who'll be talking us through a bit about the strategic planning process.
Great. Thank you, Celeste. On? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Wanted to start off first with a couple of polls to get a sense of who's attending today, in person and also virtually. If you are participating via Zoom, a poll will appear on your screen and you can participate from your device. Polls. So which branch of the New Rochelle Public Library do you visit most often? In the room, if you could just show a show of hands, who visits the main branch most often? Great, we have 3 here. Huguenot Children's Library. All right, main branch. What do we see online, Jordan? Okay. Great. Now, our second poll. On average, how often do you visit the New Rochelle Public Library? In the room, a show of hands. Who visits at least once a week? Great, everybody. How are we doing online? Okay, mix. Great. And last question, what are the main reasons you visit the library? So for those in the room, you can answer as many times as you'd like. Programs, do programs bring you to the library? See one hand. Services, one hand. Public events, everybody. And books, everyone again. And online.
So art exhibits, music, performances, etc. Secondly would be the books. Thirdly, programs. And a couple of people have also put services.
Okay, it seems like there's a lot of alignment between those attending in person today and joining via Zoom. Great, thank you so much. So wanting to preview our planning process. We launched this project in May, and that was with a kickoff meeting with the Board of Trustees. We had a working session with the board to get a sense of what their goals are for the strategic planning process. That was followed by a focus group with the New Rochelle Public Library staff. Then we moved into the first town hall, which we held in July. That's also when we launched the community survey. The community survey will stay live until this Sunday, October 3rd. And then our team will begin conducting analysis of what we're hearing from both the community meetings, the one in July and the one today, and also the survey. We'll begin drafting the strategic plan and share that with the board at the end of October, so the end of next month. This is our goal, and we want to make sure that everyone knows where we are in this timeline. And so we're at our second and final community meeting. And now I'll hand it back to Whitney and Tom to talk about the audit findings.
Sure. You want to talk about it, Tom? Great. So last year, the New Rochelle Public Library commissioned a building audit in order to better understand the condition of the library's infrastructure at both the main branch and the Huguenot Children's Library. The audit project included assessments of site features, building elements that maintain heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, interior finishes, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection infrastructure, life safety, and code compliance. The recommendations for improvement focused on direct replacement or current code compliance upgrades. In general, both buildings were found to be in fair condition, with repairs required to lessen the effects of routine wear and tear and deferred capital improvements. The assessment noted that the New Rochelle Public Library has already undertaken a range of capital improvements in the last 10 years at the main branch, including a new boiler, a new cooling tower, new entrances, a new circulation and registration desk, new seating in this theater that we're all in right now, and elevator upgrades. Even with these capital improvements, the audit mentioned costly, necessary repairs and renovations that will bring the building up to code, not taking into account any new construction. The audit revealed several issues. They include accessibility issues at the main branch in both public and staff areas, including staff restrooms, offices, and classrooms. There are inadequate toilet fixture counts for the general public at the main branch. Several systems at the main branch are from the original construction. Do we know what year that was?
It was the library here, the main library was opened in 1977.
Cool. So that's 44 years ago. Several systems at the main branch are from the original construction in 1977 and require replacement as they have reached the end of their service life after 44 years of use. And that includes the air handlers and electrical switchgear. There are other issues as well. Given the issues revealed by the audit and the need to move forward with facilities repairs, we want to hear from you about your priorities for the facilities at the New Rochelle Public Library. Now I'm going to pass it back to Celeste and the Public Works team to facilitate a community visioning activity for the library's facilities. Celeste.
So thinking about the next, want to make sure the participants both in the room and on Zoom are able to hear me. So in thinking about what you've just heard about the building audit, namely that there are some challenges with accessibility for those with disabilities and some challenges around systems, meaning, heating, cooling, those types of systems in the library, in addition to some changes that have been made. It is pretty crucial at this juncture in the strategic plan to think about what the community wants out of your library going forward. Thinking about the next 5 years for the New Rochelle Public Library, what we would love to see is for each of you who are in person to please look to one or the other side of your chair. You'll see a pen and some sticky notes, some Post-it notes, and please take 3 Post-it notes and write down on each one, write one idea or one thing about the library's facility that you currently appreciate and enjoy. So for example, you appreciate that there's elevator access so that you can get to every floor of the library, or you appreciate this beautiful auditorium. So 3 aspects about the library's facilities that you appreciate. Could be specific rooms, artwork, green space, things like that. Write one idea per Post-it note. And then after you've done that, well, we'll take just a pause to let people think about that. If you're joining us via Zoom, please take a moment in the chat to share with us 3 things about the library's facilities that you appreciate, as I mentioned. So could be any of the things we were just talking about. Okay, once you've spent a moment thinking about that, please take another set of 3 Post-it notes and jot down what changes or improvements you'd like to see to the library's facilities. Or just generally, how the library could offer a more pleasant experience for you. If you're joining us on Zoom, please put those thoughts in the chat. And perhaps note that those are changes you'd like to see. A reminder, if you're joining us on Zoom, please put 3 things you appreciate about the library's facilities, and then 3 things you'd like to see changed or improved. If you're with us in person, once you've put your three ideas and 3 ideas down, you can hand them to Aurelia as she walks by, or you can put them up on the flip charts that are on either side of the room as well. Hey, to our participants on Zoom, thank you so much for putting in some of your comments and seeing lots of them come through. And we'll be sharing those with each other and with the folks in person in just a moment. We're just collecting ideas. For those of you who are on the Board of Trustees, if you had some thoughts that you wanted to put on Post-it notes, we could get you a couple Post-it notes.
If you wanted to hear our ideas again.
Aurelia, could you hand us a few? Here, we'll go.
Wait a minute. Appreciates the other one. Need more stickies, Dan? Okay. I feel like we should have waiting music or something. We'll start singing. Thank you, whoever's doing that. Here's the last. What did I tell you? All that was is that my dog tricked my husband into feeding her twice tonight. So it's off. Latest news. Excellent.
Okay, thank you everyone so much. I think that Aurelia is kind of organizing and synthesizing some of the thoughts on the physical Post-it notes. Jordan, would you like to start sharing some of what we've seen on the Zoom?
All right, so in terms of things that people appreciate and enjoy about the facilities in the library is the auditorium, where we are right now. They also really like the children's room, which is really beautiful. We've seen it. And the art exhibits, they really appreciate how there's a lot of local artists featured in the art exhibits throughout the library, and the green space that is, adjacent or next to the library itself, as well as the green space that's behind the children's library, or the children's room. And then in terms of things that people who are participating through Zoom would like to see changed is cleanliness of both the outdoor area as well as the bathrooms, more outdoor seating, outdoor events, not necessarily facilities, but that's a really good point. A minor thing that's not also really facilities, but art can be a really great asset, but can be displayed awkwardly. So people would like to see that improved. New carpet. I would like to get some clarity on this for whoever said this in the chat, but they said theater with capacity for all types of art. I have an idea of what you mean, but if you could just explain that a little further, that would be great. And complimentary parking, that's something that people would like. We've heard that before. And then also more safety and security outdoors, right outside the library at night. Those are a few things that we've heard so far, and we do have some additional comments trickling in.
Thank you very much. So Aurelia, what can you add to that from what folks have said in the room?
Sure. Yep. I would just reiterate, there's a love of the theater space, and also the showcasing of local artists that really stands out with multiple comments here. There's a good variety of events that are hosted here, not exactly facilities, but also great to see that. And people appreciate the spacious facility space and the location in the downtown area. It's a nice hub to hold meetings. In terms of improvements, so taking advantage of the outdoor space, in terms of the facility, make it more a green-friendly space, and work on the exterior of the building, needs improvement. Windows, tile are dirty, and many comments about more restrooms, but also more parking. I think that about sums it up here.
Great, thank you. That's really a lot of extremely valuable feedback to help us understand what the community's priorities are for this space and how you want to be able to use it and enjoy it. I think that everyone on the Board of Trustees and the staff appreciates everyone's input and really appreciates both the things that you like about the library and that keep you here and keep you coming and using it. And also it means a lot to hear your thoughtful input about what could be and should be improved. So thank you so much. So the next thing we're going to talk about is thinking about, we are beginning to think about how to pay for the types of changes at the New Rochelle Public Library that are so important and needed, from the building audit changes, which are necessary for safety and security and accessibility, to the suggestions and ideas that folks have to bring the library into to be a place that folks can enjoy even more from throughout New Rochelle Public Library. As I'm sure everyone is very aware, these types of changes and capital improvements do require pretty significant funding to make happen. There are several different ways that projects like this can be funded. We're actually going to spend some time talking through what capital project funding looks like. But before we do that, we wanted to get your sense, meaning folks who are in the room, but also folks who are joining us via Zoom, via the poll that's now popping up on your screen. We'd like to get a sense of what methods of financing and funding would you support the library using to fund the implementation of these types of improvements to the library's facilities. And you can check more than one. If you're on the Zoom, you can choose several different potential methods of funding capital improvements for the library. And then also in person, we'd love for you to please look at the list up on the PowerPoint, up on the screen right now. And I'll just call out each one. And if you can raise your hand, if you think that is a potential funding stream worth pursuing. So first is government funding or grants that could come through the city of New Rochelle, the state of New York, or the federal government. Really, are you good? Okay. Taxes, which would typically be through local property taxes or school board-based taxes. Okay. A bond, which is a loan essentially for that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Private fundraising, or some people would call this sponsorships, or having named spaces within the library, basically doing a significant fundraising campaign. Another type of private funding could be developer-funded construction, which would be if the New Rochelle Public Library partnered with a developer to improve the space. And then unsure. And does anyone have another funding source they'd like to suggest? Or you may put it in the chat on Zoom, or if you'd like to raise your hand if you're in the room. So Jordan, what are we seeing from our participants who are on Zoom?
Most people are in favor of government funding through grants, private fundraising, and then one person also said that a bond would be something they're in favor of. The majority of folks also support private funding, so developer funded construction.
How about taxes?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay.
That's different than what we've been seeing, right, on the surveys. If you guys want to expand on that a little bit.
We've, I think, received 947 responses to the survey since it launched in July. And I believe it's about 53% have been in support of taxes increased to help fund this.
So too, everyone has to have their voice there.
Right, getting different perspectives.
Different perspectives.
different opportunities to weigh in. That's how we designed this so that we could hear from everybody.
That's right. We still have some days left.
Yes,
right?
yes.
We
The
still have
survey is still
several
open.
days.
Please encourage your friends, colleagues, neighbors, any resident of New Rochelle to answer.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all so much for participating in that poll. So we wanted to, we could go to the next slide. So in the first community meeting that we held back in July, a lot of questions came up about the idea of capital financing and bond, using a bond to finance a project of this type. So we thought this time, since we're actually really focusing in on the facilities and the building, it would be a great opportunity to talk through what a capital financing process even is. Just a quick explanation. So if you go to the next slide. So when a government entity decides to finance a large project, the first step is to create a plan, to create what's called a capital finance plan, where the entity, in this case, in New Rochelle Public Library's case, it would most likely be the school district who would create who would work with New Rochelle Public Library to create a plan for a capital project. And that plan would need to explain what the capital project is. So what is the long-term value of the plan? The definition of a capital project involves a few things. First of all, it has to be the type of work or improvement or project that will provide long-term value and both monetary value and kind of a physical value to the entity that is developing it, because then it actually becomes something that kind of is considered to have intrinsic value on the financial markets. And they're typically always physical projects. They can also be technological, large technology projects, but generally they are physical infrastructure projects such as building libraries, building schools, building other types of government buildings, but also roads and bridges. All of that type of work tends to be created through first the development of a capital plan by a government entity, and then the most common way for a capital project to be paid for is for that to be financed through a bond. And the other alternative, scenario 2, is to use operating budget funding, so current year funding, but we'll talk about that a little more in a moment. So first we have this winding road of how a capital project can work. So once a government entity creates a capital plan, when they have a project that they want to do, they issue a bond, which means they issue a statement to the financial markets. They publish their plan to the capital financing market. And at that point, investors, which could be banks, which could be mutual funds or retirement plans, purchase those bonds. And then the money that they use to purchase, that they invest in those bonds, becomes a loan to the entity. So for example, in the case of the New Rochelle Public Library, if a bond is issued by the school district, then the amount of money that is invested by selling that bond would come back in the form of a large immediate kind of sum of money in the form of a loan to the New Rochelle Public Library to be able to do this project. It's always tied to the cost of the project and the ultimate value that project will create for the government, and for the citizens of New Rochelle in this case. Once the bond sells, the entity gets all that funding up front, which is part of why this is a really crucial tool for financing large capital projects, because as you know, if you have ever bought something big like a refrigerator or a car or even a home, it does have to be paid for in the right away, even though you may enjoy that item for many years over its useful life. It's very much the same when a government builds or improves a large, significant building. So the entity gets the funding up front, which they then use to pay for the construction and improvements that are done to that infrastructure. And then the entity, the school district, the New Rochelle Public Library, ultimately the citizens of that town or city or school district repay that bond over time, often over 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. So that really helps to spread out the cost of this work. So the work has to be paid for upfront, but then the district is able to repay that loan over an extended period of time. And how are those loans repaid? They are repaid through taxes paid by citizens over that useful life of the bond and the life of that loan. In New Rochelle, that's usually done through property taxes, which would see a small increase due to something like a bond issue or a large capital project. And then property owners pay that usually a few times a year over the life of that capital project. If you rent your home, then those taxes are paid by your landlord, which can impact the rent. So why is this an important way to pay for infrastructure? Well, don't change it really, just for 1 minute. It's because it's a way to, excuse me, do the work, which has to be done in the short term without having an immediate impact on the school district's budget, on the city's budget. Bonds are a way of spreading a large cost out over a long period of time, and spreading the cost out among the largest possible number of taxpayers and citizens. The alternative, and now you could go to the next slide, as we had discussed before, the alternative is actually to pay for a project like this with what are called operating funds in the New Rochelle Public Library's budget, which would require that a project be split over several years to make the cost a little more manageable, and also would take an enormous piece of the budget, of the operating budget of the library or of any government entity in a given year. So I think that that's really kind of what we wanted to talk through. And ultimately, in this particular project, a big part of the next phase of the strategic plan will be to look at these different financing options, to look at people's feedback and input through the survey and through these community meetings, to help the Board of Trustees determine the best way to move forward in terms of which improvements to invest in for the New Rochelle Public Library and how to pay for them. One important thing to note is that any construction, these processes take several years. Any construction is probably at least a year away at this point, which gives time to develop the right financing mechanism. For example, to issue a bond, if that's the direction to go in. And also will give time for the cost of construction to kind of get back to normal, which, as many of us have heard and seen in the news, construction costs are very high right now due to the pandemic. So that's the bulk of our presentation that we wanted to share with you. I would love to hear if the Board of Trustees would like to add anything to that. Then we're going to have a little time for question and answer before we finish up.
That was a great slide on explaining the bonds. I think the biggest thing that we're doing, I commend my trustee members and myself, all of us getting together for the community, is we're having this conversation prior to developing any type of plan for the library, right? So usually what people do is they'll pitch you this great idea and everyone will say, well, how much does it cost and who's paying for it? We're getting to that question before we even get to this great new idea, which I think is a consideration for the taxpayers, and not throwing something in your lap and saying, hey, this has got to get done. We've chosen this great plan. We really want to execute. We're getting, to the answer first before we get to the question of, hey, here's our idea of what we would like to see the library become. I think that, we're doing this in the right way of having you guys make the choice, or, have the say of, well, this is how we would pay for anything that you guys proposed. And then once we figure that out, we will obviously have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what we're going to propose visually to the community. But at least you'll know, all right, we know how this is, we agree to pay for this, of whatever's being proposed. So I'm happy that we were able to walk through this entire process. And I'm glad that the goal here is being accomplished of having the community have their voice before we present any plans that you guys may like or not like.
Thank you, Corey. I will just add to that and say, not only is the community sharing thoughts prior to us presenting anything, but those thoughts are formulating what we end up presenting and sharing. So they are intrinsically linked. And that's why getting as many people's voices heard as possible is so critical, because this is the time that we can hear you. It doesn't mean we can't hear anything else. It just means this is the period during which we are generating thoughts and ideas and strategies, hence the strategic plan, all of which is going to go into a document called the strategic plan that will be our guiding, our guidepost for the next 5 years. The only other thing I will add is a question for Celeste and team. Are there circumstances in which bonds are issued, but they're paid for through both taxes, meaning publicly by the citizens, and also privately? Meaning when there's a debt service to be paid by the institution, is that a mechanism through which a public-private partnership with a corporation or a developer could participate in the repayment of that bond?
It's an excellent question. And I think I would say that in my experience, typically if a developer and a public entity were going to co-invest or collaborate on a project like this, only public entities can sell bonds, basically.
Got it.
So what they would do is they would determine how much each entity was going to pay for in advance, and then the public entity would only bond for their portion.
Got it. So
and the private entity would get a loan or financing for their portion up front. So then they would be responsible for paying that back.
And they would stay out of the bonding process altogether.
Yes.
And so hypothetically, you have a $10 million project. We want to issue a bond for $5 million because we understand over a 20-year period, the community can support it. Mm-hmm. And we get a commitment from some entity, private entity for the $5 million. And that's how that would work. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very common, that sort of mixed set of financing is a very common way of putting together these types of large projects. Another approach might be to mix to do a bond for the very essential infrastructure parts, but then do a capital fundraising campaign for parts that might be more, that might not be quite as, that might be softer, like perhaps new furniture, things like that, where you might give people, for example, the opportunity to have to donate and have their name on benches or things like that. So you can, you can mix all these different types. And I think that there are financing experts who will be able to help determine what is kind of the best mix.
And I ask that because we are receiving a feedback that indicates that people feel ways about all of the different mechanisms, right? Or feel supportive of all of them, and there's no one thing that everybody likes, right? There's many people who feel differently. So wanting to again reflect what we're hearing, and nice to know that that's commonly done and possible. Thank you. Any more?
I just wanted to add to that question, to the answer. So the underwriting process for the New Rochelle Public Library is the strength of the taxpayer. So when we bring in a private entity, they have to have their own underwriting. We can't put the New Rochelle taxpayer as part of the underwriting for a private entity. So we'll completely, completely separate.
I just want to emphasize that I think it's the first time ever in any public meeting that I ever hear that the mention of the renter. You did mention something about the renter, and it's always been the taxpayer, which is true, but it does have an implication on New Rochelle, especially West End, South End areas where we see a lot of families renting. Families are moving out of New Rochelle, but renting their properties, converting their homes to multi-families homes, whatever the case is. I think it's a great emphasis that you made on the fact that renters who are citizens and are eligible to vote have a voice in this. And it's very important to emphasize that, because I know during library elections, school board elections, we do see a low turnout, because I know many residents perhaps feel that their voice isn't included because I'm not a taxpayer, but it does play an effect. It's a domino effect, it's a trickle effect, either on a positive side or a negative side, depending on a household income and their capabilities. But at the end of the day, when we look at an entity such as this library that's providing valuable resources to our families, to children, to senior citizens, that's something to take into consideration. To number one, go out and vote when the vote is needed for situations such as this bonds and what have you, but also to be engaged and part of the community. So thank you for mentioning that, because it's the first time ever in any meeting that I ever say here that the renters who are paying the rent to the taxpayers are being considered. So it's awesome. So thank you.
Agreed. You know, renters are incredibly important stakeholders in every community, and I agree that they should be more. Things should be explained in the context of all the different ways that people help pay for the services that they receive in their community, because we all do contribute, whether that's through directly paying taxes or paying our rent or however, paying co-op and condo fees. You know, there's a lot of different ways that we all contribute to the success of our community. So do we have any questions? We'll start with our folks who are in the room. If anyone would like to ask a question or give a comment, and then we'll go to our attendees on Zoom as well. So we do have one comment that's come in already on Zoom. Thank you very much, which is that one participant on Zoom says that they're not interested in taxes being raised again if it's not going towards a solution. And I actually think that's an excellent comment. Thank you. That really points to the need to be very clear on how a solution will come out of this process, and help people, empower people to understand what it will really mean for them if the New Rochelle Public Library is able to be improved and more accessible for folks.
And sharing, just interjecting here, sharing what does the solution look like to you? What does that look like to you? What would the successful project or improvement be? And that's what the survey is all about.
Okay, we have another question that's come in on the Zoom, which is, what is the timeline for next steps for library improvements?
That's a great question. Do you want me to start with that, Tom? And then my colleagues can chime in. We are closing our survey. I'm going to get a little granular here for a second. We're closing our survey on October 3rd. That's this Sunday. After that, we will take several weeks for Public Works team to analyze the input that we've gotten, the responses, aggregate them, figure out trends, and share them with the board. So they will share what we're calling a draft strategic plan for review, for discussion, and presuming, this is based not only on the survey, but on several, discussions that Public Works folks have had with the staff, with community groups, with the library board. And that will happen in probably mid-October, that conversation. I forget the date of the final draft.
The end of October.
End of October. So we're looking at a month from now where we have a strategic plan in hand. From that point, we as a board, with, in our public forum and in our committees, will discuss what's next. If, we do need to address the critical issues, and we need to do that sooner rather than later. And we need to understand the scale of whatever action we take, and the scale of whatever action we take or actions, because there will likely be multiple, will be based on the outcome of the surveys and on the strategic plan itself. And the timeline, we don't know, because it's going to be several months, I would imagine, before we kind of have a plan in place where, this is how we're acting on what the strategic plan is, guiding us towards.
Thanks, Whitney. As Whitney detailed the timeline, we do have some hard and fast dates. One thing that I believe that we will be engaging in is publicity, information sharing about the findings, because the community needs to know and needs to understand. And so my sense would be, in consultation with our board, would be that possibly at the November board meeting, we would have some sort of summary presentation about this plan, and so that everybody knows. Our marketing, communication, social media efforts would also probably be utilized to, again, share what you, the community, believes are the crucial issues and the approaches that we need to take. Because as you folks know, this is a democratic, small d process where we encourage your input, and we'll synthesize it, and we'll circle back and talk to you about it. And you will continue to help us decide the interesting, challenging decisions that we need to make as we look towards the future of the library, how it needs to continue to serve the community and provide the needed resources across the spectrum, whether they be traditional services that we all know and love, like access to our collections, querying staff about information, and maybe less traditional services that relate to social service and social justice issues, as well as wonderful educational, technological, and cultural programming.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions in the room? We do have one or two more on the Zoom that I can go to as well. Okay, we have one question that came up that I believe that some folks, one person who asked that, who said that they would like to be more involved and ask for ways to get involved. So I thought that might be worth just mentioning is what are some ways to get more involved at the library, perhaps by attending Board of Trustees meetings or getting on the, is there a newsletter?
All of the above. And is the question about getting involved in this process or just in the library?
Both,
Yeah.
generally.
Go ahead. Yes, answer.
And then Daniel, we all have interesting ideas to share. And one of the wonderful things about our library is while we have a terrific trained staff, we have a cadre of amazing dedicated volunteers, and they work through more formalized groups like the New Rochelle Public Library Foundation, which this weekend is sponsoring two amazing events, Scavaganza on Saturday, and which is scavenger hunt, and on Sunday, a community fair that will be bringing people into the library. We have programs for children and teens, and all of that was made possible by our foundation, by a group of hardworking, intrepid people, board members who volunteer. So I think participation in the foundation, whether it be through its board or committees as a donor, would be wonderful. We have an equally amazing Friends group, which is sort of struggling now in terms of finding new participants because of the pandemic. Many of our most dedicated Friends volunteers are sort of not available. And so I would suggest to anybody out there that's looking to get involved, the Friends would be a wonderful way, collegial fun group of people where you can participate in book sales, have access to a newly donated material. And we have opportunities throughout the library to assist with programming as well too. So there are lots of ways to get involved, and you can approach myself. You can approach Lisa Itzkowitz, our marketing communications person. We can put you in touch with any number of different people or groups that could really allow you to contribute to the library. Dan. We do. We actually have one right now.
So that's one of the things. New Rochelle is a big, has done a big push for volunteerism. New Rochelle and Volunteer New York have partnered in many ways to promote volunteerism. One way is to go through the Volunteer New York website. Tom just stated that there's a volunteer opportunity that's there that are seeking for volunteers. In addition to that, I know the library partners with SCORE. There is eligibility criteria with that senior citizens that are in a financial. So there's so many other partners as well that work with the library that provide so many volunteer opportunities. But I guess my recommendation would be just call, show up at the library, speak to Tom, speak to Lisa, and they will guide you to the right path. There's always a volunteer opportunity, one way, shape, or form, and they will be more than happy to accommodate you.
Great, thank you. So we actually have 2 or 3 more questions. One question was about how can we, what can the library do to get more people from different backgrounds, such as the Latino community and the African American community, to be more involved in this process, and so that their voices can be heard?
I would love to share. I don't have Lisa's spreadsheet, but we have been reaching out to as many different people, communities. I'm sure we've sent thousands, and have had, as we've been reaching out, we've been sending flyers. I think several thousand flyers went to all the elementary schools. We've done e-blasts. We have a newsletter. We've had helps, promoting on various social media sites, through the library's channels, through supporters of the library's channels, African-American groups.
Right. I can also say, honestly, it is our goal that our plan is a plan that is truly reflective of the community, the diverse multicultural community. And we have redoubled our efforts as Whitney has articulated. And we've also reached out to prominent members in the Latinx and the African-American community. We have shared information about our survey, about both community meetings, and we have emailed and sent additional emails, maybe falling into the category of nagging, but mea culpa for myself and Lisa and staff and board. But honestly, this plan, the strategic plan, is not viable if we don't have voices heard from all of our community, because our community as a whole uses this library, values it. And so we need to reflect their point of view. We are doing everything we can. The survey period ends on the 3rd of October, this Sunday. And as you heard earlier, I would urge everyone listening to reach out to their friends, their neighbors, their colleagues to participate. We need to hear your voices, truly.
Survey once more for people listening. I mean, you made it onto the Zoom, so you know, but it's on our website. The board contact information is on the website. If you need help with an email template, we can send one out to you. Anyone on the staff, anyone on the board, here it is now. Use your phone. I just did a quick calculation on my phone. We've got just shy of 1,000 responses. We have close to 80,000 people in this city. That's 1.2% response rate. Those are the voices that are going to decide what happens to the library for the next 5 years. So we're doing this, and I don't want to sound too frustrated, but we need people's voices. This is the time, and we've been talking about this since the end of July. We've extended the survey timeframe to make sure that people coming back from being away this summer had a chance to re-engage and find out what's going on. We added an additional community meeting to ensure people who are away over the summer could participate. So, when all is said and done and we have a shiny new strategic plan in our hands, I will feel good about what we have done, knowing we have reached out to tens of thousands of people here in New Rochelle, through the schools, through faith groups, through elected officials, support. Lisa, say other words. We want to know why you don't use the library. So those voices are equally important. Maybe more important, because we have the support and the users who come and support the library. We want to make sure that the library is serving everybody, and if it's not, we want to know why, and then that's going to help guide us in our actions going forward.
So we do have a few comments of folks who are having a little trouble hearing. So I wanted to, I think that Whitney actually just reiterated what Lisa had said. And I will just add briefly that a reminder that the survey is available in both English and Spanish. And we also have provided translation for these community meetings, but are absolutely stand ready to assist anyone who needs additional assistance. The survey is also available on paper too. If you come into the library, I'm sure Tom has made it easy to find and pick up in both languages. So thank you. And I will also say that that's actually an excellent response rate for a citywide survey. A team from Public Works Partners is currently working on a project with the city of New York, which is obviously a really big city, but our goal is to reach 0.1% of the city. And so already reaching 1.2% of New Rochelle is actually excellent. It's very exciting. And we look forward to that number, to getting even more voices heard by the end of this process. So we have some other comments that we'll definitely take down. Thank you so much for sharing them. We did have one person who asked if how this might impact undocumented immigrants who may not have a voice if their rent is increased. And I'm not sure if maybe Daniel might want to speak to that or someone else on the board.
Well, before Daniel shares his point of view, I just want to say that our library takes no notice of the status of our residents, of our patrons. We do not ever ask for any sort of identification that will relate to citizenship. We give library cards to New Rochelle residents, period. We don't want to know anything more. It's part of our mission, and we will continue to do that. I'm proud to say that this board is very much in favor of maintaining that standard, the confidentiality of library information circulation, and protecting our patrons given their status relative to borrowing materials, as well as their use of the library, whether as a patron or as a student in our very popular English as second language classes that are conducted here at New Rochelle Public Library on a regular basis and have been for over 2 decades.
One thing that I would say, and I would agree 1000% with what Tom was saying, all individuals, including undocumented, this is a safe haven for our residents and our community. One of the most important things is that the trustees together as a team, we would not make a decision to cause a negative impact within our community. It would be the opposite, to cause a positive impact, to improve the well-being, the educational, the social and emotional well-being of children and families within our community, being undocumented, not undocumented citizens. Our goal and decisions that we make is to improve the life and our community of New Rochelle. Our library is a gem. As a person that grew up from parents that came from Colombia 30 plus years ago, I grew up here. This was a place that I came here, parents speaking Spanish, learning a dual language and learning how to take out books, audiobooks on tape. So this is an opportunity for us. What we do is to impact in a positive way our community. So it's never in a way to impact. I do understand that the implications and the domino effect that it will have. But in the long run, our goal is to make sure that educational, social, and emotional well-being of our community, and most importantly, our children, is thriving in this establishment.
Yeah, thank you. I love what both of you said, which is usually the case. You know, I will just add that yesterday I had the pleasure of, after not coming too often over the course of the pandemic, walking through the library with Tom and just marveling at the teen room. There were at least a dozen kiddos in there making a ruckus. And, you know, it felt like a living room. It felt comfortable. It felt like popping over to your cousin's house after school and playing video games, playing board games. There were kids doing the VR. We had to watch out for them because they were jabbing and punching or dancing. You know, these kids were content. There were parents with their children doing homework. There were kids studying, writing papers. There were people using the study rooms. Tom showed me one of the classrooms used for ESL classes. I used to teach ESL when I first moved to Brooklyn. One of my favorite experiences. I told Tom if I was a very wealthy woman, I would do ESL classes all the time. I would teach them. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. And an enriching experience, you know, being here for everybody, teachers, students, residents, people just needing a quiet space, people seeking knowledge. It's a gem. It's can be magical. It's ephemeral. It has these moments that we can create. We want it to be that way for everybody, and we want to understand from you what would make that sing in you, what would make you come here because you know you're going to leave having, you know, felt richer or felt more knowledgeable, gained something. That's the goal here. Thank you. Get a little excited.
That is actually the perfect note on which to complete our question and answer session. Thank you to everyone who submitted comments. We have recorded everything that has been said and everything that has been added into the chat on Zoom. So we very much appreciate all of your input, and we'll include all of it in our analysis and our preparation of the recommendations. And so with that, I'll hand it back to Whitney, who will just close us out and remind us one more time to take the survey.
Thank you. First, let me thank my board colleagues for being here tonight. A great group of people who care a lot about the library, and it's always a pleasure to work with you. Do you have anything more to say? No? Good?
Yeah, please do.
Finished? Okay. Básicamente para la gente, y yo sé que vamos a volver a poner este video en nuestra comunidad, pero lo más importante es, yo sé que hemos tratado de tener los recursos disponibles para las familias venir a este tipo de conversación. Lo más importante, les queremos recordar que si no pueden venir, sabemos que tecnología y muchos de los recursos son bien difíciles para familia. Por favor, contáctenos acá. Podemos llevarle la encuesta a su casa, a sus familias. Tomen esta encuesta porque cada actividad para su familia, para su hogar, para nuestra comunidad es importante de saber qué es lo que usted piensa, su voz en nuestra comunidad. So, por favor, llene la encuesta. No hay ningún riesgo, ningún tipo de riesgo para nuestras familias. Es al opuesto, para el beneficio de nuestras familias y nuestros jóvenes. Gracias.
Oops, thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. Great. Okay, so thank you for attending tonight's community meeting here in person, and for the folks on Zoom. Thank you so much for making the time and for spending the last hour-ish with us, hour and a half. The feedback we received from this meeting will help shape the library's strategic plan, period. We encourage you to please fill out the New Rochelle Public Library Community Survey if you haven't already. If you have, please send it to 10 friends. If everybody on this call sends it to 10 friends, we could maybe get up to 1.8%, right? Maybe even 2%. That's my dream. So send it, share the link with your family, friends, and colleagues. Post it on your social media. You have until Sunday at midnight. Sunday at midnight. They're not going to even look at it until Monday, so we're good. We have also paper surveys. If links, if QR codes aren't your thing, come to the library. I believe they are also at City Hall. Is that true? They are. In the clerk's office.
In our children's library.
And in our children's library as well. And they are both in English and in Spanish. If for some reason you know people who want to take the survey and they speak neither English nor Spanish and would like help, please reach out. Please reach out. If you haven't taken it, take it right now. It's 10 more minutes and you can still have time for a good Netflix show afterwards before you go to bed. If you want to learn more about the strategic planning process, please contact info@nrpl.org. Reach out to anybody that you can find online. We will provide whatever information you want. If you have a community group, if you have any other kind of group who would like to have more information in a smaller setting, we are more than willing to come to you, set a time, and reach out and connect with you. We've been willing and able and eager to do that since the very beginning. I think we have we have info and we have all of the information up there. Thank you all for your participation tonight. We appreciate everything, all of the feedback and your thoughts that you've provided. And with that, this officially concludes the meeting. Thank you.